I maintained a carefully neutral expression as Richard Bennett slid a document across the conference table toward me. "Morgan, as you know, we've been reviewing the leadership structure," he said, his voice carrying that practiced corporate sympathy that never reached his eyes. "We've decided to eliminate the creative director position. We're consolidating departments." "I see," I replied, not reaching for the severance agreement. After 8 years at Horizon Media, this wasn't entirely unexpected, but the timing was impeccable in ways Richard couldn't possibly comprehend. "We'll need you to stay on for 4 weeks to ensure a smooth transition," he continued, tapping the document with his manicured finger. "Amanda will be taking over the merged department. I'd appreciate if you could bring her up to speed on your current projects and client relationships." "Of course," I said. "I'll make sure Amanda has everything she needs." Richard's smile widened, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. "Excellent. I knew you'd be professional about this. The severance package is quite generous, 6 months' salary." I pushed for that personally. What Richard didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that I had spent the last 2 years methodically executing a plan that would culminate exactly 1 week from today. My name is Morgan Chin, and I was about to become Richard Bennett's boss. The beginning. 8 years ago, I joined Horizon Media as a senior designer with a reputation for innovative campaigns and a client list that made Richard personally recruit me. The agency had been founded 20 years earlier by Eleanor Horizon, a visionary who built the company on principles of creative excellence and respectful collaboration. Eleanor saw potential in me. Within my first year, she promoted me to creative team lead, and when she retired 3 years later, she recommended me for the creative director position. Her final advice to me still echoed in my mind: "In this industry, Morgan, your reputation and your relationships are everything. Guard them carefully." Eleanor sold her majority stake to a group of investors but maintained a 15% ownership through a family trust. Richard, who had been COO, leveraged his connections with the investors to secure the CEO position. The changes began almost immediately. Richard's vision for Horizon was dramatically different from Eleanor's. Where she had prioritized creative excellence and client relationships, Richard focused obsessively on billable hours and short-term profits. He introduced aggressive quotas, slashed professional development budgets, and began pushing out Eleanor's loyal leadership team one by one. I watched talented colleagues leave or be forced out, replaced by Richard's former associates who shared his ruthless approach to agency management. Morale plummeted, client complaints increased, our work, once award-winning, became formulaic and uninspired. During my annual review 4 years ago, Richard made his philosophy clear: creativity is a commodity, Morgan. Clients don't actually care about innovation, they care about results, and results equal profit. I disagreed fundamentally, but I kept my thoughts to myself. Instead, I began forming a plan. The strategy. It started with conversations, quiet lunches with former colleagues who had left, coffee meetings with industry partners, discreet check-ins with clients who had moved their business elsewhere. A pattern emerged in these conversations: people missed the old Horizon culture and were disappointed by what the agency had become under Richard's leadership. Eleanor Horizon herself confirmed this during a chance encounter at an industry event. "I barely recognize the place anymore," she confided, her voice tinged with regret. "The quarterly reports show profit, but at what cost? The work isn't what it used to be. Have you considered buying back your shares?" I asked carefully. Eleanor sighed. "At my age? No, but I've been disappointed with the returns from the trust. The investors promised growth that hasn't materialized." That conversation planted the seed. I began researching Horizon's financial situation, studying the publicly available information and piecing together what I could from internal documents that crossed my desk. The picture that emerged was concerning. While Richard presented rosy projections to the board, the reality was that client retention was declining, and new business wins were smaller and less prestigious than in previous years. The company was maintaining profitability only through aggressive cost-cutting and increasingly questionable billing practices. I made an appointment with my financial advisor and explained what I wanted to do. She thought I was crazy at first, but after reviewing the information I had gathered, she agreed it might be possible. Together, we created a holding company, MCH Partners, named for my initials, and developed a strategy to acquire shares in Horizon Media. I started with my own savings, buying small blocks of shares whenever they became available on the open market. I reached out to former colleagues who held employee stock, offering to buy their shares at a premium. Slowly, methodically, MCH Partners began accumulating ownership in Horizon Media. The real breakthrough came 6 months ago. I learned through industry contacts that two of the original investors were looking to divest their holdings, disappointed with the company's trajectory under Richard's leadership. Through my financial advisor, I arranged a meeting. "Why are you interested in a struggling agency?" one of them asked bluntly when we met. "Horizon isn't struggling because of market conditions or client demands," I explained. "It's struggling because it's lost sight of what made it successful in the first place. I believe I can restore that." After extensive negotiations and due diligence, they agreed to sell their combined 22% stake to MCH Partners. With the shares I had already accumulated and a tentative agreement with Eleanor to vote her trust shares with mine, I would have effective control of the company. All the paperwork was finalized last week. The SEC filings would become public in exactly 7 days. The present. "Morgan, did you hear what I said?" Richard's voice pulled me back to the present moment. "Yes, of course. 4 weeks transition period. Working with Amanda, I finally picked up the severance agreement. I'll review this and get back to you tomorrow." Richard stood, buttoning his jacket. "Wonderful. I know this is difficult, but I believe it's the best decision for Horizon moving forward. We need to streamline operations to stay competitive." I nodded, gathering my materials. "I understand. Change is inevitable in this industry." "Exactly," Richard said, relieved by my apparent acceptance. "I'm glad you see it that way." As I walked back to my office, I passed Lisa from HR, one of the few people who knew about my plan. "How did it go?" she whispered when Richard was out of earshot. "Exactly as expected," I replied quietly. "Is everything ready for next week?" She nodded. "The board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m. All members have confirmed attendance." "Perfect. And Amanda?" Lisa frowned slightly. "Richard's bringing her in tomorrow to introduce her around. From what I've gathered, she was responsible for the aggressive cost-cutting at Portman Agency before they lost the Davis account." I sighed. Another Richard clone. "Make sure we have complete documentation of all current projects and client relationships. I want to be thoroughly prepared." That evening, I met with my core team, the people I trusted most at Horizon and had confided in about the coming changes. We gathered at Jasper's apartment, away from curious eyes at the office. "So he actually did it," Zoe, our senior copywriter, said when I told them about my termination. "What an idiot. Firing you right before you become his boss is just..." She shook her head, laughing. "It's perfect timing, actually," I said. "It gives us a clean break. After the board meeting next week, there won't be any question about the need for new leadership." "Have you decided how you're going to handle it?" Jasper asked. As our strategy director, he always focused on execution. "I'm not going to humiliate him," I said firmly. "This isn't about revenge. It's about saving the agency and restoring what made Horizon special in the first place." "Some of us wouldn't mind a little humiliation," Zoe muttered, and the others chuckled. "The best revenge is success," I reminded them. "Now, let's go through the transition plan again. We have 1 week to prepare, and I want everything to be perfect." The week of transition. The next morning, I arrived at the office early to find Richard already showing Amanda around. She was exactly what I expected, sharply dressed, ambitious, with the kind of calculated smile that never reached her eyes. "Ah, Morgan, perfect timing," Richard called out. "This is Amanda Prescott, our new executive creative director. Amanda, this is Morgan Chen, who'll be helping you transition into the role." Amanda's handshake was firm. "I've heard great things about your creative work," she said smoothly. "I'm looking forward to learning about your team." "My pleasure," I replied with equal professionalism. "I've prepared an overview of our current projects and client relationships. Would you like to start with that?" Over the next few days, I methodically walked Amanda through everything she would need to know, carefully observing her reactions and priorities. It became increasingly clear that she had been hired specifically to continue Richard's focus on billable hours over creative quality. She repeatedly asked about efficiency metrics and resource utilization but showed minimal interest in our creative process or client relationship management. "These concept development sessions seem excessive," she noted, reviewing our project timelines. "Couldn't we streamline this process?" "We could," I acknowledged, "but we've found that this collaborative approach leads to stronger concepts and fewer revisions later. Clients appreciate the thoughtfulness." Amanda made a noncommittal noise and made a note on her tablet. I suspected those sessions would be the first thing cut after my departure. Meanwhile, my team was executing our transition plan flawlessly. Jasper had compiled comprehensive reports on client satisfaction and project outcomes, clearly demonstrating the correlation between thoughtful creative development and client retention. Zoe had prepared a portfolio of our most successful campaigns, annotated with client testimonials and industry recognition. Lisa from HR had discreetly gathered documentation of the declining employee satisfaction and increasing turnover under Richard's leadership, along with exit interview comments that painted a concerning picture of the agency's culture. By Tuesday evening, the day before the board meeting, everything was in place. I had completed most of my knowledge transfer to Amanda, signed my severance agreement, which contained no non-compete clause, thanks to Richard's overconfidence, and cleared out my personal items from my office. That night, I received a call from Eleanor Horizon herself. The SEC filings went public this afternoon, she said without preamble. Richard just called me in a panic, demanding to know if I knew anything about it. What did you tell him? I asked. That I look forward to tomorrow's board meeting, Eleanor replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. See you in the morning, Morgan, sleep well. The revelation. The Horizon Media boardroom was designed to impress, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a massive table of polished walnut. I arrived 15 minutes early and took a seat at the far end, away from the head of the table where Richard would undoubtedly sit. Board members filed in gradually, nodding politely to me. Most knew me as the creative director but had no idea why I might be attending a board meeting. Richard was the last to arrive, his confident stride faltering slightly when he saw me. Morgan, this is a board meeting. I don't think Ms. Chen was invited by the chair, interrupted Eleanor Horizon, who had just taken her seat. As the largest individual shareholder, she maintained the honorary position of board chair, though Richard had systematically diminished her influence over the years. Richard frowned but took his seat at the head of the table. Very well, let's begin with the quarterly performance review. Actually, Eleanor cut in, we have a more pressing matter to discuss. She nodded to me. Morgan, would you like to explain? I stood and distributed folders to each board member. Thank you, Eleanor. Ladies and gentlemen, as of yesterday, ownership of Horizon Media has significantly changed. MCH Partners now controls 37% of outstanding shares, with Eleanor's 15% voting with us. We represent majority control of the company. Richard's face drained of color. MCH Partners? What is this? Morganchen Holdings, I said simply. My holding company. The room erupted in murmurs as board members flipped through the documents confirming the share acquisition. Richard's shock quickly transformed into anger. This is impossible, he sputtered. You're a creative director. You can't possibly have the resources to. Actually, Richard, I mortgaged everything I own, liquidated my retirement accounts, and took significant personal financial risk because I believe in what Horizon Media can be. I interrupted calmly, and I'm not alone. Several former employees and clients have invested alongside me because they too believe this agency has lost its way under your leadership. One of the board members, a respected industry veteran named Thomas, spoke up. These numbers are concerning, he said, reviewing the documentation. Client retention down 40% over 3 years? Employee turnover at nearly double the industry average? Why haven't these metrics been included in our quarterly reviews? Richard began a defensive explanation about alternative success metrics and strategic repositioning, but the damage was done. The board could now see clearly what I and others had observed for years. The company was being hollowed out for short-term profit at the expense of its long-term health. I move that we vote on new leadership, Eleanor said firmly when Richard finished speaking. I second the motion, said Thomas, his expression grave. The vote was decisive. Within 30 minutes, Richard Bennett was no longer CEO of Horizon Media. As security escorted him from the building, a protocol he himself had established for terminated executives, Richard turned to me with undisguised fury. You planned this all along. You undermined me at every turn. I shook my head. No, Richard, you undermined yourself when you forgot what made this agency special in the first place. It was never just about profit. It was about creating meaningful work that delivers results for our clients while respecting the talents of our team. His parting words were a threat about lawsuits and reputation damage, but we both knew there was nothing illegal about what I had done. I had simply outmaneuvered him at his own game. The rebuilding. The weeks that followed were intense but exhilarating. As the newly appointed CEO, I immediately began implementing changes to restore Horizon's creative culture while addressing the financial realities Richard had tried to obscure. Amanda, unsurprisingly, resigned when she realized the agency's direction would be fundamentally different from what she had been hired to implement. I promoted Zoe to creative director, knowing her talent and collaborative approach would help rebuild our creative reputation. Jasper became our chief strategy officer, tasked with reconnecting with former clients and articulating our renewed commitment to partnership and creative excellence. Lisa implemented improved HR policies, focusing on talent development and work-life balance, elements that had been sacrificed under Richard's leadership. Most importantly, we began rebuilding trust with our employees, our clients, and our industry partners. We were transparent about the challenges ahead and clear about our values moving forward. 3 months after the leadership change, we gathered the entire agency for a town hall meeting. The energy in the room was palpable, a mixture of optimism and determination that had been absent for years. When Eleanor Horizon founded this agency 20 years ago, I began. She built it on a simple but powerful idea, that creativity and business success aren't opposing forces, but complementary ones. That treating people with respect, both clients and colleagues, isn't just the right thing to do, it's good business. I paused, looking out at the faces of people who had weathered difficult years and were now cautiously hopeful about the future. We lost sight of that for a while. We prioritized short-term profit over long-term relationships. We valued billable hours over meaningful work. But that changes now. I unveiled our new agency manifesto, collaboratively developed by team members across all departments. It recommitted us to creative excellence, respectful collaboration, and genuine partnership with our clients. After the meeting, Eleanor found me in what had once been Richard's office, now significantly redecorated with work from our most innovative campaigns and comfortable seating for collaborative discussions. "You've done in 3 months what I feared might be impossible," she said, looking around approvingly. "The place feels like Horizon again." "We're just getting started," I replied. "There's still so much to rebuild." Eleanor smiled. "Yes, but now you're building on the right foundation." She handed me a small wrapped package. "I thought this might belong in your office now." Inside was a simple framed quote, the same one that had hung in her office during her tenure as CEO. "Creativity is not a department, it's a way of operating." "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved. "I'll make sure we live up to this." The future. 1 year after taking control of Horizon Media, I stood before our team again, this time to celebrate meaningful progress. Our client retention had stabilized. We'd won back 2 major accounts that had left under Richard's leadership. Our work was once again being recognized in industry awards. Most significantly, employee satisfaction scores had increased dramatically, and our turnover rate had dropped to well below industry average. People wanted to work at Horizon again. After the celebration, Jasper, Zoe, and Lisa joined me in my office for a quiet toast. "Remember when Richard told you creativity was just a commodity?" Zoe asked, raising her glass. "I wish he could see us now." "Actually," Lisa said with a small smile, "he can. I heard he follows all our social media accounts religiously. Apparently, he's quite bitter about our success." "That's not surprising," Jasper noted. "His new consulting venture isn't exactly thriving. Turns out his approach doesn't work so well when you don't have talented people to exploit." I raised my glass. "To Horizon's future, built on creativity, respect, and collaboration." As we clinked glasses, I reflected on the journey. Richard had believed he was eliminating a redundant position when he terminated me. Instead, he had catalyzed a transformation that would define his legacy as much as mine. Sometimes the most powerful position is the one nobody sees coming, the silent partner who understands that true leadership isn't about control or short-term profit, but about creating something meaningful that stands the test of time. Eleanor had taught me that lesson years ago. Now, as the steward of her legacy and the architect of Horizon's future, I intended to honor it with every decision I made. Richard had been right about one thing: change was indeed inevitable in our industry, but it was the nature of that change, rebuilding rather than dismantling, inspiring rather than intimidating, that would ultimately determine our success. The severance package that was meant to end my career had instead funded the beginning of something far more significant, a company where creativity, respect, and business success worked in harmony, just as Eleanor had always intended. As I looked out my office window at the city below, I smiled at the thought that sometimes, the best response to being underestimated isn't anger or resentment, but quiet determination and a better vision for the future.